Hello everyone, I'm Hortense, and I'd like to welcome you to this podcast that will empower you to shine in every aspect of your life. My mission is to share with you, alone or with my guests, all the keys to help you reach your goals, reflect, grow, and inspire yourself. Replace your blocks with boldness, movement, and finally dare to step into the light of golden hour. Get ready for deep discussions, strategic advice, and inspiring stories. It's time to shine. Enjoy the show. The day you place your trust in yourself, you'll become unstoppable. In this episode, get ready for a real masterclass with Karim, a French entrepreneur and coach based in New York. Let me tell you, this is no ordinary conversation. Karim has this incredible power to shake you up with profound truths while propelling you to new heights. From Paris to Hong Kong to New York, Karim has forged his own path in the complex world of finance. As a trader, as they're called on Wall Street, what finally led him to quit trading was the quest for freedom. With the sensitivity that has always been his strength, Karim decided to put his expertise at the service of entrepreneurs. Accustomed to managing portfolios worth hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars, he succeeded in merging his mastery of finance with personal development tools to create a unique program designed to help entrepreneurs achieve their goals. I invite you to discover his inspiring journey and masterclass-like teachings. Have a good listen. Hello, Karim. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I'm delighted to be here with you in New York to hear about your career. For those listeners who don't know you yet, can you please introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be able to share my experience. My name is Karim Belalimat, and I'm mainly an entrepreneurial coach. I've been living in New York for 5 years, and before that I lived in Hong Kong for 10 years. For 10 years. I have 3 children and have been married for almost 10 years.
So, I like to go back in history a bit. Can you tell us what led you to become a trader and to come and live here in New York?
I'd have to go back a bit further, but I studied engineering and did a year in business school at ESSEC. I've always loved maths and economics. I had an uncle in my family who worked in finance, so I've always been a bit interested in that field. When I finished my studies, I decided I wanted to continue experimenting with that world. The trader's profession came to me quite quickly because it really complemented all the things that were driving me. I started working for Société Générale in Paris, and they soon sent me to Hong Kong, where I stayed for 10 years. Then I worked for an American bank, which transferred me to New York, where I worked for 4 years.
First very difficult question. How would you explain the trading profession to my grandmother?
The trading profession is divided into 2 parts. One part is risk management and the other part is risk taking. Risk management and risk taking are based on what are known as asset classes. There are 3 asset classes. Equities. Equities are simply company shares. If you want to buy a small share of Coca-Cola, you go buy a stock on the market. The second asset class is bonds. Bonds are a product that enables governments or companies to raise money. If you have a little money to invest, Coca-Cola will offer you a bond at 5%, for example, and you'll give them 100 euros, and they'll give you 5 euros back every year. When they've finished, they won't need your money anymore. They'll give you back the 100 euros and you'll have earned the 5% interest for the whole period. The final asset class is what we call commodities. That's oil, coffee, gas, everything related to commodities. As a trader, I worked in equities as a risk manager, helping institutional clients to take on exposure. For example, if you wanted to invest in the CAC 40, the CAC 40 is the 40 largest French companies. How do you go about investing in the CAC 40? You come and see me, give me your money, I'll take a small commission. And then I go and buy the 40 biggest French companies for you, giving you exposure to the French economy. So you'll be in possession of a product that will give you this famous exposure to the French economy, and I'll take care of buying the shares in the right proportions to give you the exposure you want.
Many people think that traders have access to privileged information, even confidential information, that allows them to make decisions before anyone else. As a trader, can you shed some light on the reality of this perception? Myth or reality?
There's a bit of a crystal ball myth about being able to anticipate what's going on. For me, it's just a myth. Now, the decisions of a trader or anyone else in the world of finance are based on a number of criteria, particularly quantitative ones. So, there are quite a few management tools to help you make decisions. So, really, it's all about the art of making decisions with the minimum possible risk so as not to expose the customers or the bank. And so it's really more about analyzing information that has that slightly perhaps crystal ball feel to it, but nobody really knows where it's going to go, otherwise they'd be doing it for themselves. There may be some who have a better idea, but if there's someone who can tell me that he'd put his arm out to know that the price of such and such a stock was going to be at such and such a level at such and such a time, I don't really believe it.
Right now, there's a growing craze for financial investments, particularly in the cryptocurrency field. There are more and more training courses available to help ordinary like me to help them invest and potentially make very large gains. Some criticize this trend, saying it feeds a dream of quick riches rather than really promoting understanding of the financial markets. What's your take on this?
For me, the main element in all this is risk-taking. That is to say, cryptos are a super revolution in terms of product, blockchain, and all that it brings. Now, it's associated with a level of risk. It's a market that's still very immature, that moves around a lot. So you have to be prepared to lose your money. And being prepared to lose your money means not betting amounts that are unreasonable in relation to your savings. So if you have 1,000 euros in savings, you can't play 1,000 euros on crypto. You have to play a percentage of your savings. So for me, the rule I apply only applies to me. Personally, I think it's fine to have a small portion, 5–10% of your wealth invested in riskier assets, in crypto or whatever, but at least to take a really higher risk portion. I feel that crypto is one of the riskiest assets today, but also one of the most profitable when it works, but there's also a lot of money being burned on it.
A question that's been nagging at me. It may be a loaded question, but it's one that many of us must be asking ourselves. Is trading like what you see on Wall Street? Is it all about managing pressure and stress? Is there that dark side too?
There's a lot of pressure in the financial world because there's very little room for maneuver and very little tolerance for error. But I don't see him at all as the Wolf of Wall Street. The Wolf of Wall Street is not a trader. He's more of a salesman. The trader's job is more to manage risk. As a result, I associate him more with a high-level sportsman's job, where you need to be well rested and in shape to make the best, most rational decisions possible and not leave too much room for emotion in the way you manage a portfolio, the risks and all that goes with it. So, I associate it more with something bordering on the boring high-level sportsman than with the Wall Street wolf who parties morning, noon and night.
Finally, you're telling me that this dark side doesn't exist, or maybe it does.
It does exist, but it remains fairly marginal. I think the traders who make a career of it are pretty healthy and have a good head on their shoulders.
It's true that it's a profession that requires you to manage and handle a lot of money. In France, there's often a certain reticence to talk openly about money, unlike in American culture where it's more commonplace. As an entrepreneur, it's a real challenge to work on your mindset towards money. It's really crucial, especially when it comes to setting prices and developing your business. Quite often when we're starting out, we tend to have trouble accepting our prices. Then, when you want to scale up your business, there are a lot of things to work out. Was it your experience in trading that made you feel more comfortable about this? Is it the American culture? Now that you're a coach, do you coach your clients on this aspect of their relationship with money?
The approach to money is really very personal, but it's true that culturally in France a rather taboo subject. Abroad, this is less the case, but I would say that France is an exception. In the United States, it's not really a subject. People are quite comfortable talking about it, earning it, and spending it. In fact, I often use an image that's perhaps a little too schematic, but I like to say that a French person will earn 100 euros, spend 80 or 90, and save 10 or 20. An American will earn 100 euros and spend 110. That's the mentality. And as a result, you can see it pretty much everywhere in the American economy. To answer your question about the contractors or about the clients I work with, in fact, the program I've built is in 3 stages. It starts with the person, what I call the self. Then it moves on to the others, i.e. the people with whom you interact, your investors, your customers, your colleagues, and then to the world. And the world is where the ability to trade and the money aspect of finance enable my clients to break free from a whole host of barriers they may have set up for themselves. Trading really gave me that dimension, managing portfolios worth several hundred million or even several billion. I really did have a very special relationship with money because in finance, money is both input and output. So this relaxed side of my program really comes into play in the last phase of the job to really break down growth barriers and really be able to, for example, in this case, sell packages for those who do service. A much larger client of mine, when she started working with me, was selling packages for around $20,000 or $30,000 to luxury groups. Today she's selling packages in the $300,000 range. So it's still something completely different, but then that's people's lives. I have co-founders who work in tech, and they've seen their sales grow by 50-60% in the space of a year. So in fact, with all these growth vectors, it's clear that my relationship with money in the world of coaching, which is a world where there are a lot of people coming from human resources and therapy. This financial aspect, given that I'm just about the only idiot to have left trading, or at least trading in the coaching world, I try to bring this sort of slightly different touch. And that's where I'm trying to make a difference in the coaching world.
It's really interesting, this aspect of the money mindset.
Part of the program.
We really need to work on all the aspects that enable us to get to that level. Can you tell us about the shift that turned you around? From trading to coaching and supporting your customers.
Yes. So to go back quite a long way. In fact, in 2015, I had a sort of mini burnout, and so I started seeing a shrink. And in fact, after 6 months, I was feeling better. But then I wanted to carry on. In fact, I liked it so much that I had tennis on Tuesdays, soccer on Wednesdays, and on Thursdays, I went to see my shrink, and I loved it because it helped me understand myself. It helped me understand others. At the same time, I had both professional and personal challenges. I became a father, I got married, and so I really loved the exercise and did it for 7 years. And that's how therapy made me realize that I really liked the side of self-analysis and analysis of others. Then a little later, once I'd really worked my way up in the trading world, I became head of desk trading. I also realized that I was moving further and further away from what had brought me into this world. And as a result, I had a kind of quest for meaning or a desire for at least some freedom. And that's where, in fact, I asked myself certain questions to succeed in taking the step towards something else. And the steps were quite simple. I made a list of values and a list of professions. Among the values, there was freedom, there was helping others, and there were professions like real estate, like working in another type of profession in finance, another job in investment funds. There was Psi. And in the end, crossing out all the professions that didn't correspond to my values, I actually fell back on Psi. Okay, I'm going to become a therapist. It's great, and I look at the training I need to do and see what my days are going to be like. In fact, I realized pretty quickly that I'm going to be dealing with a lot of subjects: depression, anxiety, chromatism. And I realized that it's not really me. I've been an expatriate for 15 years. I'm the father of 3 children, and I'm married. I have a relatively good career and a good situation, and I feel I'm missing a dimension. And I stumbled across some ads for coaching schools on the internet. And at the time, I knew absolutely nothing about coaching. And so I typed in best coaching school in New York. I was already living in New York, so I thought I'd explore. So I called a school called IPEC, and I explained to them that I didn't really know if this was what I wanted to do, but that I'd come across their training and I'd like to find out more. And they were quite nice, because they said, if you don't know what you want to do, we have a 1-year program, but you can just do the first module. It's only 3 days, and you don't have to pay for the whole course. And if you like it, you can continue. And if you don't like it, you'll have learned things for your role as a bank manager. And so I say, great, I'll do that. So I sign up and do 3 days of training, and then it's really like Obelix falling into the pot. I really loved the first day of training. I knew I'd found my next job, but I didn't know how. In other words, I knew that but I needed to understand all the issues that were going to come between me and this career change. And there were plenty. So maybe later I can explain how it all happened. But in any case, that was really the trigger that made me quit. So after that, I hired a coach. I went to this coaching school, and it took me 2 years to transition completely and really become a full-time coach. Full-time coach.
And this burnout you're talking about, what was this feeling of being exhausted by the job you were doing before? A need to realign yourself? What exactly did you feel?
So burnout and career change are really different. They're not at all driven by the same energy. When I changed careers, I wasn't in burnout at all. I was feeling relatively well. It's just that I wanted something else, but I wasn't at all unwell, whatever that may be.
Yes.
Whereas the burnout, which was more like him in 2015, happened rather paradoxically at a time in my life when I was earning an extremely good living. And I grew up in a relatively modest family in Seine-Saint-Denis, so in the Paris suburbs. And in fact, the more money I earned, the more I felt my happiness curve dropping. And then I found myself in an existential crisis where I lost my footing a bit and needed to understand why I had done all this, in fact, and why the fact that I had achieved all my goals, become a trader, earn a lot of money. I was already with my wife, and she was extraordinary. So everything was going well. Why am I not happy? What made me sad? So there was the pressure of work, but in fact that was one element, the pressure of work. In fact, I discovered, and this is also part of my program today, that in fact there were a lot of childhood topics that I hadn't fully dealt with, that I hadn't fully understood, and so in fact I didn't know myself. And this quest for self is what really got me out of that depression and indirectly led me to the coach I am today.
Yes, you've come to say to yourself, my wine isn't being fed. What am I running after? And what are my concrete goals in life?
Exactly. But that actually came about a long time ago, in 2015. But even so, when I trained as a coach and made this career change, it wasn't a pain that led me to do something else. It was more a desire for something else. In fact, I wanted something else, but I wasn't in pain. I could have stayed another 10 years, but I didn't want to. Deep down, I wanted something else. So I had to sort out a lot of things with myself. And coaching enabled me to do that. Therapy has never enabled me to take such big steps as leaving an extremely well-paid profession like trading to become a coach. I think really the definition of after is a plan for after. Coaching is the best tool for that. It's unbeatable. It really is therapy on steroids.
And what were the challenges you faced during this transition? Have you had any? And have those around you been supportive?
Well, that's a great question because, of course, there are a lot of challenges. Money comes with its own set of constraints. In reality, we don't realize it, but it's both very emancipating and very imprisoning because when you earn a certain amount of money, you're used to a certain amount of spending. And as a result, you can quickly find yourself in a kind of unhealthy spiral. And I had to rebalance a lot of things. The first was my vision of the coaching profession. In reality, for me, the profession of coach had a lot of connotations, as it does for a lot of people. Coaching has two problems. It's low bar for entry and high bar for success. And in fact, it means that anyone can become a coach, which is a real problem because it takes away a lot of credibility from those who do it with a lot of passion and commitment. And high bar for success is really, there are very few people who manage to turn it into a real business and make a living from it so that it's not just a passion. And so it took me a long time to deal with that myself and to get over the hurdle of, I can say out loud that I'm a coach, in fact, and I'm not ashamed to say it. As an anecdote, in the sticking points, when I was a trader and I arrived at US Customs here on my way back into the country, there was a moment when I was very close to the financial end, and I said to myself, the next time I go through customs, I'm going to have to say coach. And in fact, I wasn't completely at peace with that yet. And in fact, really behind that, I said to myself, but really, what does it mean to be a coach? It means helping others. It means being an entrepreneur. It means being free. It has so many positive notions that there's no reason to be embarrassed or ashamed of it. And when I was truly aligned with myself, the world opened up before me because it changed. There you have it. When you're sitting comfortably in your sneakers, you're anchored, you're aligned, the world around you feels it. And so all of a sudden, the problem wasn't what the customs officer would think, it was really what I thought about it and what I saw in it. That's the first element, the first sticking point. The second sticking point, so I had to come to terms with the fact that I was no longer a child. I'd already achieved certain milestones, and that I needed to be at peace with who I was today. And then I had to be at peace with who I was going to become. And it's okay to earn less. And it's okay for your wife to take over some of the financial responsibilities you'd assumed. And it's okay if your kids don't go to that private school in 15 years, because you might not be able to pay for it. You have to trust them. I was asking you if it was their plan or your plan. And then if you stayed in finance, what would you do? If in 20 years' time they don't want to be a lawyer or a doctor and they want to do something they enjoy, what do? You'll have wasted 20 years of your life. So in fact, that's when I realized that all I had to do for my children was to trust them and give them love. And we try to give them the best education possible. Obviously, my wife and I try to put a lot of positive energy into this. But it's true that when I realized that the world didn't depend on me, I really didn't need to burden myself. A lot of things were going to fall into place. I grew up in the Paris region, in a relatively modest family. I never went to a single private school, and I managed to get by. So in reality, I really wanted to get out of it. There was nothing that was going to stop me. And when I understood that, in fact, it really emancipated me in this life project. And as a result, it helped me to let go, in fact, to trust myself. And in fact, the day you put your trust not in others, but in yourself, it changes everything, because then you become unstoppable. Because in fact, you don't care whether you make money or not. You know that you have confidence in life and what it's going to bring for you and for the others around you. And that's the greatest gift you can give. And that's what coaching has given me, this transfer of confidence from the outside in. And that's the greatest gift I try to give my clients too.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right about that. What's more, when you're confident, you give off an energy that makes those around you trust you. Exactly. They'll go along with you and say, okay, I'm with you. If you cast doubt, that's where people will bring their fear, their doubt. But if you stand up and say, I've made this decision, I've measured things, and this is my decision. Exactly. And besides, I think it's a great role model. Great role model for your children to build themselves by saying, in fact, my father was able to have several lives and he chose himself. He chose to listen to who he was. For themselves, to build themselves, that
history will tell us. They'll say, my father was crazy to take that risk.
It's going to give them something. I think it builds them up. It's really strong. Did the people around you change when you changed your job? Your energy, perhaps? Energy, perhaps?
Not at all the same friends, the same company. Nothing really changed. In fact, the world around you is really adjusting. Once you're well anchored and aligned, I have the same friends, I see the same people, I have different interactions. Of course, today, I'm creating real deep relationships with my customers. And they mean a lot to me, I think, in the shower, to help them as much as possible on their personal and professional path. But apart from that, friends, interactions, family, nothing has changed. In fact, everything stayed in its place. In fact, there's a lot more stability around us when we're comfortable in our own shoes, and that's what's hard to understand, really. When you're in the right place, the world adjusts around you.
And what have you learned from changing professions? Often we say to ourselves that even with maturity, we do things differently, we know ourselves differently. Perhaps the fact that you've gone from trader to coach means you're more in tune with yourself. Have you developed new skills? Have you discovered new resources?
That's an excellent question. One thing I did have in me from the start was the desire to help others. When I was in prep school, I used to give math lessons and I loved it. What's more, in the professions there was teacher, and that ticked no other box. So helping others has always been part of my life. On the other hand, there's a part of me, I think, that came out of coaching. It's the acceptance of my own sensitivity. I think that's something I've really discovered on my coaching journey and that I'm at peace with. I'm at peace with and have accepted completely. And today, I'm able to connect with my clients, to sense when their stomach hurts, when their throat hurts, when there's an idea they haven't digested or swallowed. I'm able to listen to all the messages that come from this form of sensitivity, which was less present in coaching for reasons that were certainly my own, but for which I left little room, and my sensitivity in coaching was expressed more by aggressiveness or violence, rather than by calm and a kind of appeasement. So, the real pivot is energetic. It's in the acceptance of my sensitivity and the energy I'm able to give and vibrate to others. Because in reality, I'm really at peace with what I do and why I do it.
In fact, you couldn't exploit it in the trading world. That
Exactly.
has certainly created some inner conflicts. I think it's a quality that's an enormous strength, and one that's often relegated to the status of a weakness.
And even worse than that, I'll say a word to myself. I don't know if this is going to be taken well or not, but it's often a characteristic associated with femininity. And in fact, I don't know why, but I think it was buried. And today I have no problem fully assuming it. It exists, it's there, and it helps me in my daily professional life. And there's no reason to bury it anywhere. So yes, I think the word sensitive is connected to notions that can be potentially pejorative. Not only that, but if you take the feminine side out, sensitivity is also sometimes associated, as you said, with weakness. And in fact, in reality, it's weakness if you decide it's weakness. But if you decide to turn it into a strength, it becomes a weapon of mass destruction. And today, when I help people connect to their sensitivity, I have some clients who refuse to cry. But in session, this is the space where you're allowed to cry. Come and get out the emotions you need to get out so that you can go and find that famous strength that's there, and don't bury it. Because in reality, it's going to help you do so many things and connect with your emotions, your sensitivity. It's part of a certain development key that simply unlocks levels for people.
Once you'd found your coaching path, could you go back to the time when you wanted to turn this project into something concrete? I mean, I'm going to turn it into a business. What stages did you go through? You mentioned earlier that you started with beta testing, saying, I'm going to test myself, because it's always dizzying to think that for X years, you've been an expert in your field, and now you're starting something from scratch. Once again, I think you need to build up your confidence and prove yourself a little. Can you tell us a little about the process and stages involved in building this project? Even how you chose your targets, the customers with whom you had real added value.
Well, there were several stages between that famous day when I fell into the cooking pot and the moment when I really became a 100% coach, a little over 2 years actually. And during those 2 years, the first was clearly training. So learning coaching is a bit of an art and a science. So there's the science, the theory side, where you have courses. The course I did was called Energy Leadership. So it's really about how, and it's very well theorized, how to really use what they call energies, which are very important, which is the sum of three things: a way of thinking, emotions, and the resulting actions, and how to apply this to leadership skills. So leadership isn't about being a manager, it's about having an impact, whatever that may be. An entrepreneur is a leader, a manager in a company is a leader, a stay-at-home mom is a leader. Everyone is a leader in their own right. And so energy leadership was my basic training. And so the first year was learning the theory, the science. Then the second year was all about the art, i.e., what do I develop around who I am? How do I manage to make this a unique experience for people? And I really didn't know anything about that. So I started offering coaching around me to anyone who would listen. I was ready to coach anyone for free for an hour. And in fact, people loved it and asked me how we could go on working together. So people were actually willing to pay. And when I realized that, I said to myself, there's a real business here. And so one thing led to another, and I coached all kinds of profiles, from entrepreneurs to people in career transition, managers in companies. And I realized that with entrepreneurs, there really was an incredible fit for several reasons. The first is that they're often alone. They're alone between their investors, their customers, sometimes their employees, sometimes even co-founders feel alone, unable to communicate. And so in reality, I came to fill this solitude, but not in a purely benevolent way, like a friend. In fact, I'm a sparring partner, meaning that I'm there to give and give back with benevolence, in quotation marks, just to make you better, but I'm on your side. I'm not against you. And so in fact, that's really the big difference between a coach and a friend who's going to give you advice. I'm not a giver of advice, but I will help you to become the best you, the best version of yourself by focusing on you. But what counts is you. I'm out of the equation and I never interfere in my clients' stories. The most borderline thing I can do is share what I'm feeling, ask permission, share what I'm feeling, or share what I think is an option. But in reality, I always let people decide for themselves. That's really the difference between someone who does consulting and someone who does coaching. I'm not there, I don't know your life or your business any better than you do, but I can hear the sticking points that are going to prevent you from developing that, and then I'll explain the theory that goes with it. And that will help you move towards that. So I've coached all kinds of profiles, thank you. And in the end, I realized that entrepreneurs were great for filling in that solitude part, but also the finance part, which didn't exist much in coaching. There weren't many coaches with a background in finance. And so this part helps them enormously, because for business plan development, to raise funds, and what's more, I've managed large portfolios. So I'm not afraid of talking about millions, and I'm not afraid of talking about millions. So I'm not afraid to talk about millions, and I'm not afraid to talk about budgets, and I'm not afraid to talk about ACE debits or anything else you might want to know about all the notions that revolve around the real life of an entrepreneur and his constraints, particularly financial ones. I'm not afraid to talk about them and to address the deeper issues. And so it helps me enormously to bring this brick of finance into the world of coaching, which is a brick that I feel is particularly lacking.
It's interesting because you anticipated a question I was going to ask you about the difference between coaching and consulting. Among the customers you referred to earlier, do you specialize in any particular type of customer? Rather those who need to skill their business? Do you still do reconversion courses? What type of customer do you really add value to, and do you enjoy accompanying?
Well, that's a great question, because it took me a long time to define that too. And in fact, what I don't really do is what we call 0 to 1. 0 to 1 is really the part where we try to find our product, our service, our offer. I don't do this too much, but I often work with companies with sales of over $500,000 to help them grow to the next stage. If you're still at the stage where you're asking yourself 10,000 questions or haven't yet found your product, then the 4, 6 month, 1 year projects we'll be doing together will mean that you'll still be answering certain questions. But will it be the best investment? Aren't there other people who could have helped you? So, given that my role and my goal is to have an impact in order to maximize the impact, I work with companies that start at 300 and 500. I'd really say that's the low end of the scale. And the biggest clients are 50, 60 million euros.
That's pretty impressive. As we were talking about earlier, when someone decides to work with you, when they want you to accompany them, can they see it as a long-term marriage? Or on the contrary, do you like to time things and have a definite duration for your accompaniments?
It's the same thing. It's a great question. So in fact, what I do is I offer an hour. So I have a few eligibility criteria for offering an hour of coaching. The programs are never longer than a year. In general, they average around 6 months with given frequencies that are all tailor-made. In reality, there are people who need it every month, people who need it every 2 weeks, and people who need it every week. I don't work on an hourly basis, i.e., I work on the duration of support and also on the return on investment. So we have a well-defined project after this hour as a sort of inventory of fixtures. There are people I don't work with because it's not going to be a good return on investment for them. And for me, because I spend a lot of energy, I give a lot of months to coaching, and conversely, they bring a lot of energy to the coaching. Conversely, they bring something in return, so it wouldn't be fair not to be able to meet their demands and expectations. And so there's a kind of program that's created, and the image I often give is a bit like a bowling ball, in that at the beginning there's a lot of inertia, and the idea is really to launch this ball, to give it a kind of force, a kind of momentum, to give it a kind of strength, but once it's rolling it doesn't need me anymore, so I really help to give energy and strength to this bowling ball. And once it's rolling, you really have to stop. Your impact, when the ball has already been thrown, well, necessarily, by its very nature, it's less powerful. So since you're doing this for impact, it makes more sense for them and for you. So that's how I work. I like to work on very specific, very fixed durations. Sometimes there are packages that are renewed.
What advice would you give to people today who might lack the confidence or audacity to embark on a project they feel strongly about? A project that's close to their heart, whatever it may be.
It's counterintuitive what I said earlier, that as a coach, I don't give advice. I'm going to take off my coaching hat, and here I'm going to tell you what I think. But there's one thing that often comes up, and it may sound silly, but it's to put desire at the heart of things. In fact, when you really want something, but when I want it, I really want it. In other words, by priority list, it's above everything else. When you really want something, in general, barriers and self-confidence issues will naturally jump. You won't think through the prism of constraint, but through the prism of opportunity. By opening doors, you'll put even the smallest amount of energy into the smallest task to get the ball rolling. In fact, if there's one piece of advice I can give, it's to focus on your desires, connect with your desires. And give yourself the chance to try and be wrong, i.e. to just go and exploit your idea, no matter how small it may be, no matter what the business idea may be, no matter what the next idea may be. Just give yourself the chance to think about your desires and how much energy you're going to put into doing the thing. And when you manage to connect with that, well, you're already part of the way there.
It's funny you should mention that, so I thought I'd ask. The notion of failure in your state of mind, how you've settled in.
You dread it? That's another great question, because in reality, the notion of failure is synonymous with the notion of success. So what does success mean to you? How do you measure it? I ate a sandwich on my desk for 15 years. I finished early. I had evening calls. I started early in the morning. And in fact, my freedom is priceless. It was a milestone. I don't know how to explain it, no matter how many zeros there are at the end. Today I interact with my customers on a daily basis, including weekends, and I really enjoy it. That's my essence. I create much greater value. I create much greater relationships. If you'd forgive me, the relationships I create with my customers is fantastic and priceless in my eyes. And so the sum of these two things and these values allow me today to be fully in line with myself and fulfilled in what I do. My metric is simple. Do I help people? Am I free? Yes, so point success is here now. If success was, I'm not anything earning X thousands of euros, not, it would be something else, in fact. But besides, there's a concept I'd like to share in coaching I learned in my training and that I love, and I'm going to try to share it very simply and very quickly. But in fact, it's as if there were two approaches, the performance-oriented approach and the mastery-oriented, performance-oriented approach. I want to earn anything up to 5,000 euros a year. Months, there's a very good chance that you'll get there, but you'll go straight on to a goal, and then you'll focus only on performance, on your ability to reach that goal. You've completely forgotten that the journey is more important than the goal, and so once you've reached that goal, don't worry, your brain is pretty good at giving you a new goal. Mastery-oriented means that every day you invite yourself, you try to be a better version of yourself. Whatever you do, you lay a brick, small, but you lay a brick. What's my path? Okay, what's today? Coaching went badly today. I didn't manage to help this client or to do this or that. What can I do differently tomorrow? What am I ready to accept that I did wrong? I don't want to paint an idyllic picture of the entrepreneur's journey, of the coach's journey, or of the journey of life in general. It's a challenge, it's high and it's low. But on the other hand, really embracing values that are less about performance and redefining what success is, I think that for me, in any case, it's helped me a lot to feel good about what I'm doing. It's not all rosy. I've got lots of things to improve on, but I feel really good, really good, really good inside.
Makes me think of what Steve Jobs used to say. If you don't like what you're doing, that's the best way to give up. And on the contrary, if your way is strong, you don't give up. I don't know if we ever talked about it, but you pointed out something interesting to me on the phone when you were making the comparison between American and French culture. Between American and French culture, saying that the French came with a problem, and the Americans with an ambition, it seems to me.
That's exactly it. I don't think we've talked about it, but it's more an observation I've made while coaching different profiles, notably different nationalities. And it's true that I don't want to generalize, but my French customers arrive with a problem and I have to help them solve it. My American customers arrive with an ambition and we work on that ambition. And I think it even goes back to their education. When there are Americans and French, the French ask what the math program is, the Americans ask how you're going to give my child self-confidence. And so in fact it's a different approach, which is great. And at the same time, being French, I think I like the fact that there's no one thing better than the other. In fact, there's a complementarity, which is good, because without the French education I received, I'd be incapable of doing anything. I'd be incapable of doing anything. I wouldn't have been able to make my career as a trader and do lots of things, but I don't want to give a connotation of it's good or it's bad, but on the other hand it's different, and when it's different, succeeding in connecting the differences I find to be a real great asset, and this asset is what I try to exploit with my clients, because I manage to coach both profiles, American clients and French clients.
I could talk for hours about this subject. Karim, do you have a mantra that guides you through life?
Well, they help me, so I don't know if they help others, but there's one that's pretty basic, and that's you cannot make a mistake. It means you can't make a mistake in reality at the moment in your life when you make a decision. You make it for lots of reasons of your own, and in fact, replaying the match of why you made that decision in the past will never help you build your next step. You'll always end up with the wrong reasons. So in reality, you can't make a mistake. I find it very powerful. And the second that I'd like to share is the same. It's in English. I'm sorry. It's pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. It means that in fact the pain you felt at a given moment in your life, and it can be about very serious things, a death, a divorce, life events, will never be able to take away the pain you felt in that moment, in that given moment, whatever it is, whatever the pain is. But suffering is optional. You don't have to suffer from it every day of your life. You can have control over what comes next. You don't have control over what happened. And so, in fact, these two phrases help me and my clients to get over certain hurdles, because we have an unconscious tendency to close in on things, to replay the match, to blame or victimize ourselves in a way that's potentially legitimate but not necessarily constructive for the next stage.
Wow. Listen. Thank you, Karim, for everything you've shared with us. It's been a real masterclass from the start of our exchange. There's full value, so thanks a million for that.
Full of others. I've shared the two that I think really speak to the greatest number of people, but there are plenty of others too.
Would you have a book or film to share with us? I like it. It's always a great way to discover new things, whether it's about personal development, coaching, or something that must resonate with you.
Must. I'm more of a mathematician than a literary scholar, so I haven't read 20,000 books in my life, but I've read a few all the same, particularly books on coaching and development, which that doesn't actually advocate personal development, which is called, so I'll probably misspell the name, but the author's name is Frank Lobvet, and I think it's called Ton Autre Vie. And this book is almost anti-personal development, but it does explain one thing, and those who say it will learn a great deal. And that is that life is in fact polarized, that for every positive element, there is a negative element associated with it. An associated negative element, a good representation of this is what I was saying about money. Money is both very emancipating, very liberating, but extremely imprisoning. I know people who earn millions of dollars, but who feel imprisoned by those millions of dollars. Yet they thought it was the way to emancipation. So you must never forget that things are polarized, especially every level of happiness has a potential level of suffering behind it. Every level has its own set of disadvantages, and every negative character trait has its own potential for suffering. A positive character trait, and when you manage to live life in a polarized way, not good or evil, but good and evil. Both, my captain, it can be both, in fact, no problem. And, well, I find that we see life really differently. So here's your other life, Frank Lobet. And the second one, it's a bit more technical. It's called Happy Pocket Full of Money. It's not a book about money, but it is a book, but it's in English. It's quite hard to read. It talks about quantum physics, etc., but it's hyper fascinating for one reason. And I'm going to give you the summary so that people who don't want to read it don't get a headache. In detail, and I'll give a concrete example. If you say outright, I'd like to have a big house in 10 years' time, good luck. If you say, Karim, me in 10 years, I'd like a 200 square meter house with a 300 square meter garden, 5 bedrooms, 6 windows, an open kitchen with parquet flooring, with potentially even 2 children inside, and you manage to say where this house is going to be. And even if it's not exactly what's going to happen, the more you draw up your project in detail, the more you're going to attract it to yourself, because life is going to give you events where you'll go towards this house, and this house will at the same time come towards you the moment you look on Sology.com, all the houses, it will appear much more obvious to you this house, was the house you already wanted before. So in reality, the image of saying that you're going to go towards this house is quite classic. But the interesting thing is that you're also attracting this house because you're going to take action, because you're going to attract it. because you're going to take action because you know how much it costs, so you're going to take action to earn a living. And the more your life project is defined in detail, even if it's not exactly the one you're going to end up with, the more likely you'll be to go towards that design, the realization of this experience.
It's exciting and a perfect conclusion. Karim, if the people listening to us would like to contact you or be accompanied, where can we find you? Can you share your website, your social networks, and I'll put all the info and links below the podcast.
So it's been a great pleasure to talk to you about this career change, because it's been driving me from the inside out. It represents a lot of things, and it's also really about the fact that everything is possible when you really want it, no matter how many constraints you have. If you really want something in life, if this desire is big enough, this flame is big enough, there's nothing to stop you, and it's not a speech that takes away the potential pitfalls along the way, but it's the speech of someone who has really gone through phases that could potentially seem difficult, not easy, but who managed to overcome them because the desire was greater. So my company is called Moksa Partners, and there's a website called moksapartners.com with a KMOKSA and partners, because I'm your partner, and my LinkedIn is Karim Belalimat. And I'd be delighted to point you in the direction of people who can help you explain what I do. I'm going to do this in my life because I don't know what to do, but I really want to help others. I put myself at the service of others. I don't know any better than others. In fact, I don't know anything about it. Help you see life a little differently. Allah fulfilled my mission, and that's priceless.
Thanks a million, Karim. Thank you, Karim.
Thank you. See you soon.
That's the end of this episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't hesitate to leave a star or a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for your loyalty. See you next Tuesday for a new episode. Remember to join the community on Instagram for even more inspiration, tips, and good vibes.